I'm Eric. This is From Prison to the Streets. I did 11 years in prison. On this channel, I like to talk about some of my experiences from when I was in prison and kind of what it takes to reintegrate into society once you get back out. So, in my last video where I was kind of talking about my story, I was being sent to a mental hospital because I thought something bad had happened to my father, and I started punching the walls, and I hurt my hands and I hurt my head, and they're going to ship me off to a mental hospital. So if you haven't seen that video, check it out. But be sure to like and subscribe. We're going to continue on that story here. We're going to talk about when I went to the mental hospital, what that was like. So here we go. Why did they send me to a mental hospital? What was going on with my father? This is all stuff that we need to talk about. They determined that I was a threat to myself and others. That is why they sent me to a mental hospital. They felt like I needed a 90-day evaluation to see if I was competent to stand trial and mentally fit to stand trial. Because at this time, I was facing life in prison. I was looking at attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, aggravated assault and battery with a deadly weapon, 7 counts of drug paraphernalia, 2 counts controlled substances, just a whole bunch of charges. And aggravated kidnapping and attempted murder by themselves were enough to give me life in prison. Each one separately was enough to give me life in prison, but they were trying to run them consecutively. That's what their plan was going to be. So that's what I was looking at. You know, I'm 17 years old, county jail, looking at life in prison. Thought I lost my dad, flipped out, started punching the wall, busted myself up real bad, and now I'm looking at going to a mental hospital. So I sat in a suicide cell for a day or 2 days or something like that, during which time my father actually contacted the jail. I wanted to get them to pass on a message that I was doing okay, and that made me feel a little bit better. You know, but I'm still waiting to see what happens with this mental health thing. I know they're doing a involuntary commitment cell they put me in. I talked a little bit about it before, you know, mirrored glass, observation cell. Kind of felt like, you know, I was in a Hannibal Lecter cell. I don't know if you guys have ever watched the Hannibal movies, but he's usually in a cell that's made out of glass or plexiglass or something like that. It's kind of what it felt like. And they give you this outfit. It's a suicide smock. We called it a pickle suit. And some people call it a turtle suit. I've heard it called that before as well, but it's basically this material that you can't tie up. It's like a dress, essentially, that you can't tie in a knot. And they take away the rest of your clothes, except for they left me with my boxers, and I thought the turtle suit was the most ridiculous thing. I was not going to be 17 years old in jail wearing a dress. I'm sorry, I'm not going to do it. So I refused to wear it, and I was walking around in my boxers. But they called the county that I came from, they called them while I was in the suicide cell, and they were complaining that I refused to wear clothing. So yeah, when you're in trouble for some sort of mental health thing or being evaluated for some sort of mental health thing, they watch you and they make notes on your behavior. All that stuff goes into a log and they keep track of that. So if you ever find yourself in that situation, try to act as normal as possible, because everything you are doing is going to be recorded. So they ended up deciding to send me to a mental hospital, but they didn't know where they were going to send me because I had a high-profile case. They thought that I was really crazy. They thought that I was really violent. So they had to wait until a hospital accepted me. No one wanted me. And finally, they sent me to Kaw Valley Center in, I believe it's in Wyandotte. It's up in the Kansas City area. And it's basically a mental health center for, you know, teens is the part that I went to. Big building out in the middle of the hills in Wyandotte. Wyandotte is technically in Kansas City, but there's a lot of hilly areas out there that are also out back in the woods, it seems like. And that's where they sent me. It was kind of a long drive up there. The sheriff's deputies from my county picked me up and they drove me out there. John Hawes, really nice guy. He was one of the older jailers there. I think he was the main jailer for Anderson County. He was driving and he brought another guy with him, and John was cool. He always let me smoke and stuff when I was being transported by him. He figured if I could be charged as an adult, I could be treated like an adult. That's just kind of a I don't know. Sometimes I say people in Kansas have kind of a cowboy mentality, you know, and no pun to the hat, but they're an old school way of thinking. You know, out here there's still men who act like men, you know, whereas in other parts of the world it seems like men have been watered down. I don't mean that to offend anybody, but around here you need to man up. It's just the way it goes. Anyway, so they transported me. It was like 2.5 hours. John even stopped somewhere along the way and let me get McDonald's. You know, he took me to the McDonald's in belly chains and leg irons and handcuffs. And we went through the drive-thru, got us some McDonald's and stuff. It was cool. But we get up there, and I'm actually looking forward to getting there. I'm tired of being in county, and I kind of want to see my father. So in the county jail I was at, I had 15 minutes of visitation per week behind a piece of glass, so I couldn't give my dad a hug or anything like that. But that's not the way it was up at the Kaw Valley Center, KVC. So I was looking forward to that, and I was looking forward to better food. And so I get up there, and it wasn't like, you know, county. There wasn't a bunch of cops running around, and when I say cops, I mean guards, you know, but cops in prison, you know, or guards in prison, or county jail, or whatever, we call them all cops. It's just the way it is. If they carry a badge and a radio, they're a cop. So there's that. Anyway, there wasn't a bunch of guards running around. It wasn't really a secure facility. It wasn't meant to hold incarcerated people, so they didn't actually have any armed guards at the facility. They had to contract a armed guard from a security company in Kansas City to come down and watch me personally. So I had my own armed guard that followed me around all the time. Kind of funny when I was at the hospital. The other thing that was really cool about the hospital, they thought that I was very dangerous. They thought that I was crazy and very dangerous. Now, if I hadn't lived through this, I wouldn't believe it if I heard it, but what I'm telling you is true. They gave me my own wing of the hospital. They closed the area where I was at off from the rest of the hospital. So there was a bunch of empty rooms, nobody staying in them. I was the only person in there. And it was closed off from the rest of the hospital, so there was a day room there and stuff like that. But I couldn't go to it, you know. So they had my hallway and the area where I was blocked off. They had the doors shut, so I couldn't go in and nobody could come in aside from a doctor or a nurse. And that was kind of different, you know. There was no TV or nothing back there because that was all in the day room, and so I didn't have access to that. There wasn't even a bathroom in the hospital where I was at, so we had to go on the other side of the hospital to do that. And whenever I needed to use the bathroom, my armed guard would let the nurse and doctors know, and they would go and they would lock all the other patients in their rooms so they could take me out into the bathroom. And they were not very happy about it. You know, if I needed to pee or something, it was a big deal, and they got mad. And sometimes, just for the hell of it, I would tell them I had to take a piss when I didn't. just so I could watch them run around and lock everybody up. And then when they came back, I'd be like, oh, well, I guess it was a false alarm. And they would get pissed off at me. And now I know it was probably wrong of me to do that, but I had no other way of entertaining myself. I didn't have a TV. I had some magazines on a table back there. No books. All I did was pace the hallway and do push-ups. That's it. A lot of the orderlies and, nurses and stuff wouldn't even talk to me. Hold on, let me shut the volume down or off on here because people are going to keep sending me stuff. A lot of people wouldn't even talk to me back there. The orderlies wouldn't talk to me. The nurses wouldn't talk to me a lot of times. There were maybe a few people that talked to me. I got one of the guards to talk to me finally. And I just wanted some interaction. I was 17 years old, I was a kid. And if you take a kid and you set them in a room by themselves and don't talk to them, we're not talking like for a few minutes. We're talking about days, That's not the way kids are. I did some pretty bad stuff, but I was still a kid. So I wanted some sort of interaction. I finally chatted up one of the guards, the armed guards, when he came on shift. I went over there to the desk and I started talking to him a little bit. And a lot of them wouldn't talk to me because they knew my case and they thought that I was a really bad person. But, one night I started talking to this guard and I started asking him about his gun, and at first he was kind of, why is this inmate asking me about my gun? And I just, I thought I would strike up a conversation with him. Guys like guns, so, you compliment a guy on his gun and ask him about it, he's probably going to open up to you. That's what I did, that's a really nice gun. Is that yours, or is that something they issue? And his face kind of, well, I don't know if I should be talking about it. I'm like, oh, well, it's a really nice gun. I'm into guns. Well, this is actually mine, and I had some work done to it, and so on. So I struck up a conversation with him. It was cool. I did get one visit while I was there. That was kind of nice. The one thing that I didn't like about the place, though, is they put me on a lot of medications. I didn't know up from down, from side to side. I'm telling you, I was on so many medications. They had me messed up. The nurse would come in, ask me a bunch of questions. They took my height and weight. They gave me a complete physical, actually. And then they did a bunch of psychological tests, so that was fun. But they decided that they couldn't pay for me to have an armed guard anymore. And so they decided to have me moved to Larned State Hospital. Larned is a mental health facility out in... It's kind of western Kansas, but you could also make the argument for central Kansas. It's basically out in the middle of nowhere, But they sent me out there. They actually had a secure facility. They had a secure facility that was just for juveniles, and that's where they sent me. And it was still a hospital, but they had security. They had cameras, locked doors, all that good stuff. And a bunch of teens there that were troublemakers. Not a lot of them, just a few. And that's where they had me. Once again, no one wanted to interact with me there. They all thought that I was a really bad person. They all knew my case. They all talked about me, and just no one wanted to have anything to do with me. And that is where I was supposed to finish out my 90-day evaluation and get back to county jail. And Larned was okay. I mean, the food was good. The staff were really nice to an extent, except for the actual doctors, the psychiatrists that would prescribe medication. They were real pieces of work. They just wanted to feed you pills, and that's basically it. And they put me on so much medication, I was messed up. I couldn't even hold a deck of cards because my hands would shake so bad. My That's basically what was happening. They were giving me so much medication. I was starting to have horrible side effects. My face would twitch. I would get random muscle twitches to the extent that I couldn't sleep at night because my body just wouldn't stop moving. It was constantly in motion. Couldn't really hold a drink without spilling it on myself. I was in really rough shape. And in order to get me to go to sleep. So one medication did that. It made me twitch real bad and made me shake. Another medication they put me on was to help me sleep because I couldn't sleep because I was twitching. And they gave me some very heavy tranquilizers to put me to sleep at night. And so I was drugged, very, very drugged. And they finally decided, I wasn't in Larned but a week or two. I got one visit while I was there, and it was a very comfortable facility. It was nice. The rooms were just like hospital rooms. You had your own bathroom in your room. You had a nice big bed in your room. It was beautiful. You even had a shower in your bathroom. It was cool. But none of the other patients there wanted to interact with me. They were all kind of afraid of me, so I would just do push-ups in my room all day. And I remember one day I was in my room doing push-ups. Had my shirt off. I like to work out with my shirt off. And one of the nurses came in and said, Eric, in this hospital you need to be fully clothed at all times. And I said, is that right? He said, yeah. Well, what happens if I don't put my shirt on? And they said, well, nothing, you just don't earn your points for this hour. Because every hour that you were behaved, you'd get some points, which could be used to buy, certain privileges. And he said, no, nothing's going to happen to you, you're just not going to earn any points. And I'm like, so you're not going to throw me in the hole, you're not going to beat me up, threaten me, throw me in handcuffs, etc.? It's like, no, we're not going to do anything like that. I'm like, oh, okay. And I turned around and kept doing my push-ups. I didn't put the shirt on. I was kind of an asshole, but at this point, I was facing life in prison. I didn't care, So, they got tired of me real quick. They decided I was taking up space that someone else needed worse than me, and they didn't like having me in the facility because they felt that I was a danger to others and I didn't deserve any help. Was basically where they were at. They didn't feel that I needed to be there. They felt like jail was the best place for me. And so they shipped me back to county. And when I got to county, I was on suicide watch for 48 hours again, just for protocol. And then they kicked me back into a pod. And that was that. There's a couple things that stuck with me about being in those hospitals. One, they over-medicate kids. When you're a teenager, you don't need to have your, mind bogged down with drugs. And they put me on a lot of drugs. Second thing, there are things that happen to children in those facilities that should not happen. I remember when I was in Kaw Valley Center, in the area I was at, they had, I don't know if they call it a safe room or a segregation room or what, but it's basically a modern day equivalent to a padded room. It had a door with a little window on it. And if a patient was acting out, they'd throw them in there. But they'd throw them in there for anything. They misused that. When I was at the Kaw Valley Center, there was this one girl that was acting out. And I wasn't in the day room when it happened, but I could hear the whole thing. All she did was talk back to the orderly. they were talking slick to her and she started yelling at them, and so they tried to restrain her and she didn't want to be restrained. They grabbed her by the hair and they drug her down the hallway. The hallway in my wing. They did not lock me up for this. They drug her down the hallway by the hair and threw her in that segregation room or safe room or whatever the hell you want to call it. This girl was like 15 or 16 years old. They're dragging her down the hallway by the hair. In orderly. You call me a bad guy all you want, but if you're a grown man dragging a 15 or 16-year-old girl down a hallway by her hair and you know that she's mentally ill, you're a piece of shit. I'd like to meet with you. We have something to discuss. But I feel that way about a lot of men that abuse women and about a lot of men that abuse children. I don't have the time for you. I really don't. You wanna fight with somebody? Fight with me. I can defend myself. Don't pick on somebody who can't defend themselves. That makes you weak. That's my opinion on that. But, yeah. I'm Eric. This has been another episode of From Prison to the Streets. I hope this episode has helped you in some way or has educated you in some way. I got some more stuff coming up. I'm going to talk about that in another video. But for now, I'll see y'all later. You guys have a great day. Take it easy.